The orange glow of the sunset began to disappear behind the horizon. The sounds of nature dwindled into silence. Not even a snapping twig decided to be. The surrounding air grew cool, welcoming in the warmth of the summer. My thoughts were interrupted by my father's sudden grasp on my shoulder. "It's almost time." I smiled at his statement. It was indeed almost time. I was always excited towards the dusk of Saturday nights, especially this night. We had just finished cleaning up after my 16th birthday party. My mother walked my best friend Gina home. Her parents were more strict than mine. My father wanted to be certain that I would have the best party this year. The last of the sunlight was swallowed up by the mountain range in the distance. My body began to tingle in excitement. I closed my eyes in preparation for what came next. All I heard for a few seconds was my and my father's breathing. A low hum flooded into my ears. I tried in the past to find the source of the sound, always failing to. The hum continued for a minute before more sounds joined in. The coordinated sounds of many instruments joined in unison. Each new sound took its turn as they all came together, forming such a beautiful song I've never heard before. A tear ran down my cheek as I absorbed all of what graced my ears. It was as if an orchestra of music was performed for me on my special day. I was entranced by each note, enraptured with every chord. I barely felt time flow by as quickly as it had. Within minutes, the song had faded into silence, only to be replaced by the sounds of nature once more. Every Saturday I heard the music. It was never the same. My father confirmed this as well. Our home was passed down from my grandparents to my father. My family had owned this house since our ancestors moved here, passing it down generation and generation, renovating it every couple of decades. I must have fallen while hypnotized. I remember my father picking me up, cradling me in his arms. He carried me into bed and wished me good night. I dreamed of absolute bliss, reliving the music in my subconscious mind. I awoke to birds chirping outside my window. The sun's hike had almost reached the peak of the mountain. The scent of bacon and syrup had graced my nostrils, causing me to jump out of bed. I raced to the kitchen, finding my mother just finishing up a stack of pancakes and bacon for her, my father, and I. I started with a few of each, smothering them in butter and syrup. My stomach would regret this later, but I would let my tongue enjoy it. A half hour had passed. By the time we had finished cleaning up after breakfast, when the doorbell had begun to ring. I answered the door to find Gina. "Hey, want to hang out?" Turning around, I saw my mother waving me off with a smile. As we left, I slammed the door behind me out of excitement. "Quick," I said. "Let's go before my dad begins to scold me for damaging a 200-year-old house." We spent the morning at the park shared by the neighborhood. After what felt like a couple of hours, Gina asked me a question that I found strange. "Why is it that only your house has that music?" "What do you mean? I thought all the houses next to the woods could hear it." "Yeah, right. I tried to listen as your mom walked me home last night. Stopped right after I walked off the grass." I didn't know how to answer her. I found it especially strange. Well, we could always go for a walk in the woods to find out what it is. Didn't your dad forbid you from entering those woods? She was right. Out of everything my father was overprotective about, those woods were on the top of his list. What he doesn't know won't kill him. We could head out tonight. I'll just sneak through my window. Gina looked hesitant for a few seconds, before she begrudgingly agreed. We ran about for another hour before I heard her mother calling for her. "I'll knock on your window tonight. Stay awake," she told me as she ran off. When I got home, my father gave me an earful for treating the house with respect. I pretended to listen as his lecture went in one ear and out the other. My mind wasn't there, until he said that I was grounded to my bedroom for a week. I tried to protest, but he wouldn't hear it. I walked with my head towards the ground towards my room. I sat at my bed for a couple of hours. When my eyes began to shudder open and closed, my head collided with the pillow, causing my body to rest and relax. My slumber was interrupted by being shaken slightly. I opened my eyes to see my father looking at me with disappointment in his eyes. I'm going to possibly unground you if you sincerely apologize to this house." A smile crept onto his face. "That's it?" I asked, surprised at his generosity. "Yes, but you're still grounded until lunchtime, okay?" He extended his hand towards me. I grasped onto it, giving his hand a firm shake. The wait was long, but worth it in the long run. Once 12 had rolled around, I walked out of my room to the kitchen. A meal had been prepared by my mother, yet Father didn't join us. A few minutes later, I heard him coming inside quicker than usual, slamming the door behind him. He walked up to me quickly, standing for a few seconds to catch his breath. Deep concern filled his eyes as he spoke firmly and cautiously. "Do you remember where you and Gina went yesterday?" His question confused me for a second. I tried recalling the previous day, remembering hanging out with her. "Yeah, we were at the park for a few hours." "Okay. Where did she go after that?" "She walked home, after her mom was calling for her." "And you're certain that's what happened?" "Yes, I'm certain. Why are you asking? Did something happen to her?" My mind began to race with the possibilities of what could have happened. "Her mother came to me a couple of minutes ago. She was in panic, asking if Gina was here. I told her no. It seems she's been missing since this morning." I recalled what she told me the day before, about her waiting for me so we could go look in the woods. I knew it wasn't a good idea to tell my father of where I suspected her to be. He looked towards my mom and nodded. Afterwards, he left through the front door, letting it slam shut. My mom stood up and began to clean up the entire meal she made for us. I barely finished half my plate when she took it from me. I tried to protest, but the look she gave was of absolute fear. I quickly made myself scarce and left to my bedroom as she continued wordlessly. I began to hyperventilate, trying to catch my breath. I stared at the woods through my window. It felt as if they were calling to me. The sun still held its position at the peak of the sky. I had a few hours of daylight left. At that moment, I would live to regret the decision of going into those woods. I grabbed my jacket, slipping it on quickly. Quietly, I crept to my window, sliding it open slowly to hide any creaks. Creeping outside, I made sure to stay low and avoid my mother's line of sight. Fear and apprehension filled my body as I made my way to the forest's edge. Eventually, I found the line where my lawn ended and the trees began. After a quick breath, I stepped forward. A mighty gust of wind flowed past me once I stepped off my grass. Turning around, my vision was filled by a vast forest, countless lush green trees as far as the eye could see. Looking forward again, a path of aged red brick formed a path. Quite a distance away, a very tall wall of hedge stood. Bracing myself for any other possible oddities, I walked forward. The sun had descended quite a distance from atop the sky. The temperature was dropping quicker than I had suspected it would. Looking down the path, only a few more minutes walk away, I saw an arc carved into the hedge. The pathway led through it, and on to a cage of greenery. I walked a bit slower, a bit fearful of what may have hid behind the wall. I finally walked through the doorway and gasped. Within the outdoor cage was a setup that seemed sophisticated. What graced my eyes were immaculate, pristine white instruments of every kind. Pianos, violas, drums, trumpets, every instrument was perfect. No speck of dust rested on any surface. No leaf, no forestry remained in the area. It felt otherworldly. The tuning of the strings caught me off guard, making me spin towards the far back of the line of music markers. That's when I first noticed a man had been standing there the entire time. His back was turned towards me. It looks as if he was fiddling with a device. He stopped suddenly, turning back slowly to face me. His face was oddly thin and pale, yet kind. He tilted his head and smiled. "Ah, it seems I have a second visitor. Who are you, young one?" I stuttered a bit. "It's, Sam." He was a very tall man, very spindly, as if his limbs were made out of branches. Who else was here?" "Oh, it was a young woman. I don't believe I caught her name. Well, what did she look like? Let me see. Blonde hair. Her eyes were very bright green, almost as tall as you are. My eyes grew wide. She had come here, and I had basically abandoned her by falling asleep. Did you see where she went? I haven't been able to find her since last night. I'm worried something may have happened to her. Yes, I did see where she went. Let me think a minute while I try to recall. Would you tell me what you think of my latest instrument? He turned around and plucked up a smooth, shining white violin. He reached for the bow and showed them to me. I studied the craftsmanship of the immaculate musical tool. I looked at the bow, and something peculiar stood out. A crack ran down it, almost as if it had been split and put back together. A thought struck my mind. It reminded me of when Gina had broken her arm years ago. I looked closer. My eyes widened as I recognized every detail of the crack. My memory flashed to the X-ray I had seen years ago of Gina's arm. A shudder escaped me. I started to walk backwards, away from the man. His smile never left his face. I turned and began sprinting down the path. The sunlight had almost completely faded into darkness. I kept looking over my shoulder to see the man chasing me, but I never saw anyone. The pathway had disappeared, leaving me in the forestry once again. I looked in the direction of the path once more, yet it was gone. I was staring at the edge of the forest once more. I felt a pair of arms grabbing me and pulling me backwards. I heard my mother's voice as she sobbed. Thankful that I had returned. My father held us both in his arms, never losing his grip. We sat there for a while, all of us weeping. The sunlight long gone, the sounds of nature had vanished once more. A familiar hum graced my ears. Instead of collecting instruments, a solitary violin pierced the silence of the night. Caressing my pained heart, it sang its song.